Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the EAPRIL 2024 conference. I hope you got off to a good start yesterday, day 1. Today we started with a rousing happy birthday, and we are now going to go on to our second keynote. I'm happy to welcome Professor Beatrice Ligorio, who joins us from the University of Bari in Italy, where she teaches educational psychology as well as e-learning. She is the co-founder of the Collaborative Knowledge Building Group, which was established in 2001 already. It was to create a space for discussion about research and application of new technologies in education. It has grown and now organizes its own conferences and has its own journal. She is also the editor of the journal QWERTY and the co-editor of the new journal Early Learning in Context. On the scientific committee of many journals in the field of education, and with over 200 publications herself, she is well represented in the academic literature. Her research interests go from collaborative learning to innovation in education, as well as educational technology. Which brings us to the topic of blended learning, which will be the focus of today's presentation. So with no further ado, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Beatrice Ligorio.
Good morning, everybody. I'm trying to get familiar with this handset here. It's the first time I'm using it. But anyhow, thank you very much for this invitation. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to really be a part of this nice atmosphere. It looks very familiar and very, very productive as well. I also had a look at the posters already, and I got some feeling of what's going on. Okay, let me go on with the presentation, and I just wanted to let you know if you have questions during the presentation, it's okay to raise your hand and let's have a more, let's say, interactive presentation. So if you have comments or questions during the presentation, they're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to present a model that is called the Blended Collaborative Constructive Participation Model. And here you have an overview of what I'm going to present. So there is an introduction about this new model. And then I will give some more thoughts about the relevance of technology. And then I will present the model, its foundation, the elements, and a few examples just to make it more concrete. And then a few conclusions. So, okay, so do we need, this is an interesting question. Do we really need a new model in education, and why do we need it? I mean, we always, if you look at the literature, even starting from the 70s or the 60s, even the 60s, there is always, the word new is always there. So there is always something new. And we don't even have time to get, familiar with this new model, and there is another one coming in. So in this case, the new model is in a different sense. It's in a way, the way the old stuff already known and already well established has been combined in a new way. So this is the essence of the news in this model. So the idea is to put in practice the indications that are coming from many models that are already well established in the research and in the literature, such as collaborative learning and social constructivism, and also to capitalize what we learned during the pandemic, which has been, a really turning point in our culture and in our societies. So what happened during the pandemic, everybody knows that. So there was a big shift from face-to-face education to some, you can have different labels. So distance education, emerging remote teaching, online learning and teaching, and even blended learning, but I will get there later. So I try to find a balance between negative points and positive points, and there were some very negative points. Some people judge, some research judge the forced distance education as disruptive, aggressive, disastrous, unwelcome, but also a lot of positive points. For example, it was an opportunity to rethink assumption about education. It was an harmonious integration of tools and methods for the sake of more active, flexible, and meaningful learning. Nothing can be worse than a return to a normality. So often we see titles like The New Normality, but still it's not the way it was before. So this is something we have to take in mind, because what happened during the pandemic, that both teachers and students and all the other agents around education, they got more familiar with technology, and they had to think about, how to use technology. So technology seems to be relevant finally. It was also before, but it seems now that there is more conscious about, how relevant, how important it is to use technology and to use it in the right way. So we need to rethink, in this process of rethinking what technology is and how we should use it to be more effective in education. I went back to another, maybe you know him, Warszawski, that he classified technology in 3 different levels. So there is a primal level of technology, which is considered as an extension of our physical human capacity. For example, the hoe to make it our arms stronger, or for example, the sewing needles that, makes our finger able to do more, more fine action. But even the glasses that you see in the background, amplifies the power of our sight, our eyes. This is the first level. The second level, it's about artifacts that are assembling primary artifact, and they produce something that is completely new. And they are like conceptual tool, for example, a recipe that puts together different things, it puts together elements and procedures. And at the end, you have a dish that it's something, even more than the simple addition of elements. Or, for example, the laws, its norms and laws are, artifact that regulates our life, and they are composed of different things put together. The third level, it's at least in my opinion very interesting, because it's referring to artifacts that help us having a new vision of the world. So the way we look at the world is impacted by the contact with art, for example, movies that can change the way we look at things. So, for example, a Hitchcock movie that made us thinking in a different way of the psychological personality of people even doing, murders or, criminal stuff. Or, for example, the Divine Commedia, the Dante Divina Commedia that made us thinking of the, the world after this world, and it's impressed a lot. I mean, it's remaining in our representation of what is happening after life. And this is, for some extent, this is done also by digital world that, it's a different world. It's also affecting the way we look at the real world. We are immersed in a digital world, and then we are also still here in the real world, and there is no more big distinction. As you might know, another Italian researcher like Luciano Floridi, he's talking about he's removing the difference between on life and off life, and now he's talking, is remarking how there is no differences, and those things, those 2 worlds are really connected to each other. But in my opinion, what is happening here is that the way we conceive the technology and the way we classify technology is depending also on the historical moment we are looking at that technology. Now we can consider we can consider things like the hoe and the sewing needles like primary artifact. But if we try to imagine what happened when they were first introduced in the society, they made a very big impact. Can you imagine having more, being more productive, or being also more capable to organize your life, your time? So if you are more productive, you don't have to work all the time. You can save some time, maybe, for example, for your family or leisure or hobbies. And also, it's less risky. So it's also, implies also a better welfare, a better, being in better shape because you don't have to work all the time to be that productive. So it really made a change in the society at that time. So it's the perspective we are looking at technology that makes the technology some level, at that certain level. But if you look at the, in this perspective, in the more social cultural perspective, what is happening now, the technology is offering us a fourth level, at least in my opinion, which is artifacts that are supporting identity development within communities. Think of what is happening with the social network, for example. We define our own profiles, but those profiles are included and they make sense within that community. So this is the type of technology we are affording now, that we are, to take into account, and we have to consider how this can be used in education, how this type of level can be used in education. So we can use it if it is well-designed integration between online and offline, so blended perspective, and if you combine different pedagogical techniques, and if you are ready also to cross-boundary process, because if you agree that there is no more big distinction between online and offline, then we have to think how you cross those boundaries, and then how, what happened when you go back and forth. And of course, it cannot be just a replication. It has to be, make sense. What we propose, the activity that we propose, both online and offline, they have to make sense to each other, and they have to capitalize each other. So the theoretical background that inspired the blended model that I'm going to present is called the trilogical learning approach. It's been first defined by Paavalo and Akanainen, which is they are part of a Finnish group of researchers. And during an European project where I participated as well, we defined this idea of trilogical approach to reduce, for example, the gap between the educational context and the knowledge that nowadays society, the needs that nowadays society have, what is needed to know to be effectively part of this contemporary society. And they emphasize also the rule of contamination between communities, and they value the mediation of technology, the mediation rule of technology. So those are already very aligned with the idea of what is blended learning. So why trialogical? What does it mean exactly trialogical? Trialogical is a combination of monologic, and when we refer to monologic, we think of the emphasis on individual knowledge and the conceptual process. So the traditional way of teaching, which means that we are not getting rid of that. I mean, it's still an important, relevant part of this model, and even if it's just one step in this model. Then there is the dialogical dimension, which is everything which is referred to the social interaction, so collaborative learning. And the third element, this is the very news, the third element is intentional and collaborative production of objects, shared and useful, meant for someone else. This is in my opinion, the real news in this model, because producing object is something already done usually in school and educational community. This is not a big news. What is new here is that those objects are going to be useful, are going to be used by someone else, by a different community, and this forces the educational context to look for a partner, to look for someone else outside the community, and then we will see how this is happening and why, and the consequences. So as theoretical background, we have collaborative learning. There you will find a lot of elements about collaborative learning and computer-supported collaborative learning. You will find also elements and ideas about learning communities with different degree of virtuality. Learning is considered as knowledge building and not just as acquisition of information or conceptual change. This is a step forward. Learning, when we talk about knowledge building, I refer particularly to Bereider and Scarnamalia, but my personal interpretation is that when you allow students to produce their own ideas, their own knowledge, and you put them in the condition to do that. Because, even if, we are not expecting to have Einstein in the classroom, but what is our duties, let's say, is to make them feeling that they could. that, potentially they could be, inventing something. The inquiry model and the problem-solving model as well, the activity theory that specifically the relevance that they give to the mediation of artifacts, and of course the blended learning theories. But what we mean here for blended learning is not just the combination of face-to-face and online, because when you combine face-to-face and online, unavoidably you are also combining, for example, different pedagogical models, because you cannot apply the same educational model when you teach online and when you teach face-to-face in the classroom. That is not productive, and there is research that is proving this, not with any doubts. So you combine different pedagogical model, and you combine different context. And if you manage actually to combine different contexts, so to mix, to have, let's say, in a metaphorical way, to have a classroom without walls, then the blended model is much more efficient and much more productive. So the main features of this trilogical approach is that students are very active. They turn to be very active, and the need to involve real stakeholders from outside the learning context. So the first thing we need to do is to think to whom can it be interesting, the product that my student can do. To help in using this approach, there are 6 principles, and I will go now in detail, shortly, to each of them, not in detail, not to take too much time, and if you want to know more, you can always ask. So let's see the first principle. It's defining the object to be built. That has to be real, challenging, and needs to be for others. So this principle answers the question, what would we build? So what is the object that can express the content and the knowledge that we are delivering to students? So in this sense, the idea is that you put in practice the knowledge. You help students in finding right away why this information is important. And, I need this information to build a certain object. Of course, the list of objects, I will give you some example later, can be, as long as you can imagine, and there is not a predefined list of objects. The second is promoting practices and artifact hybridation during collaborative situations. So this answers to the question, for who? Who is the object intended for? So who's going to be our partner in this adventure of building a new object? And this means having a vision of, who's going to be our counterpart and our partner in building the object, gives also the possibility to know a different community, to know their mindset, to be exposed to their language. Sometimes it's specialist language, but sometimes they have, special terms, special words. So, and to have the feeling that really what you're doing is needed in the society, which is something that the school has to, to learn how, to claim this rule, because at least in my opinion, school should be more active in the society and not just following the indication that come from above, but being able to give the direction of where the school should go and what kind of student we want to have. So the third principle is the envisioning long-term process concerning the use and the development of the object. So the idea here is to give an awareness that the objects are an evolution of previous objects. And this evolution continues also for the object that we are building. So to try to improve also a vision of how this object will be used and how will it change after that has been used by the final users. The fourth principle is emphasizing creativity to, for example, transformation and reflection. Those are the 2 proposals that are within the model, but of course there can be much more ways to do that. For example, if you ask students to give them the content in a certain format and you ask them to transform that content in a different format, for example, you give them a text and ask them to make a video of that text or to make, for example, a map, or the way around, you give them a video to look and then ask them to prepare a text that is describing and is commenting the video. So moving from a format to another one is shown to improve creativity. The same effect you might have also when you work on draft. Don't wait that the object is finished and to show to someone else, because at that point, the feedbacks that you might have are completely useless because you finished already. So working on draft, sharing draft, and educating also on making comments and giving feedback on the draft, making clear what are the evaluation, the assessment criteria of that object, maybe together with the external partner that are going to be using that object. The fifth, it's supporting individual and collaborative work. So how do we integrate and combine individual work with group, with the work group? This is not that easy, although there is a lot of literature on that. So one way, there are lots of educational and pedagogical models that help us on solving this problem, on facing this point. For example, Jigsaw. Jigsaw is a strong part of this model, or role taking as well. But there is much more. For example, reciprocal teaching or the circle time. There are lots of other pedagogical models that can be included in a way that the individual helps the group and the group helps the individual, which is, also social value that is needed, especially nowadays. Sixth principle is about technology. Here, the suggestion is to provide flexible tools and it answered the question, what technology do I plan to use for what purposes? And actually, this is a very crucial question, because the idea is not to use technology just for the sake of it, but to be clear how do you match pedagogical aims, objectives, and the use of technology, to make it this clear also for the students. And the other challenging, which is, I think, interesting, it's also to show to students that the technology that they are already using they can have a value in education, because it's not so obvious for them. I mean, there is a lot of technology in our students' hands, but they're using it, for example, for social purposes, to listen to music, to do shopping, all kinds of things, but not education, not to learn. And this is, still kind of, funny, because the potential is there. There's a lot of literature showing that even technology that is not made in purpose for educational purposes can be used for educational purposes. Actually, that technology that has been created and developed for pedagogical purposes is less used in school, which is kind of funny. So let's go to the model. So the model is organized around 4 elements: structuring the educational content, organizing the group, organizing the contamination, and defining the activities. So how do you structure the content? So the suggestion, the slogan here is break and repeat. So you have the content of your lesson or your teaching. You can break it in parts. I call them modules, because this is a term very common in e-learning literature, and I found it useful also in educational context. So you can break it in units. And the idea is to have each unit with the same structure, different content, but same structure, in a way that students can be exposed many times to the same structure, every time with different content. This makes them, getting, to slowly get into the process and understanding the process, and give them different chances to perform certain activity at the best. So what do you do when you organize the content? It's important to differentiate what you do online and what you do offline. What do you do online? You select the tool, for example, considering the match between the aims and the affidance. So how is this technology easy to be used by my student? It's affordable. Do I have to spend a lot of time on explaining them what is it and how to use it? If the answer is yes, maybe it's not the right technology. So it's much better to select those technology that is already known by the students, so they feel familiar, they feel not stressed or disappointed by spending time on understanding how it works. For example, maybe you of course, all this type of technology, but just to give an example, Padlet can be a good tool for brainstorming, learning management system. It's like a converging space where you can find both communication and repertory of documents and papers. For example, Drive, a Dropbox, which is a storing place, web forum, WhatsApp, webinar, Skype, Zoom. All those kind of technology can be combined for depending on the aims that you have in mind. Organizing the group. The group can be temporary and they can be random. They have better to be random, not to, because why random? Because you know with the jigsaw technique, you have at least two different groups. You have expert group and jigsaw group. Expert group, they go deep into a piece of knowledge and piece of curricula of the content, and the jigsaw group, they combine the different knowledge that comes from the expert group. So I guess you are familiar with this technique. It's an old one. It's been developed by Aronson in 1978. And then, for example, to support a constructive process, it's good to start with a research question. We as a researcher, we are familiar with the research questions, and we know how relevant it is to have a research question, how good it is to have a research question, because it's guiding our activity and also it makes our activity readable for the other people. So why don't we apply the same thing with students? So what is your research question? What is it that you want to know? And why are you building this object? What is that this object is covering that it was not yet there? So put them in a situation that they are at the border of the knowledge and they can challenge what themselves they know, so to develop something new. This is an example of how I organize jigsaw group and expert group. For example, you have jigsaw group. When you read it in vertical, you have expert group, and they are working on different objects. Those names that you see here, the name of the object. And if you are interested, I can tell you more about that. And if you read it in horizontal, you see the jigsaw group. So when you give this table to the student, they know immediately that they are belonging to two different groups, and they are going to be involved with different people. So it's not so relevant to choose your partner, because you are going to be in two different groups, and you might at some point you might be with the person that you like to be. But this is important under the social aspect, and in this kind of table, you can also assign the rules to the students, and I will go back to the question about the rules later. So organizing the contamination between different contexts, online and offline. So, for example, give some time to the student to familiarize with the technology, even though they know already the technology, but they need to understand how to use it in this specific case. And this can be something new for them. And assign to the student specific tasks that have the function to connect online, offline. For example, note taker. So whatever is happening online, there is a specific student that has this rule that takes notes and then reports offline what is happening online, and vice versa. So there is a group of students that is reorganizing the content, and this is also according to the creativity process. You give them a format. I give you an information online, and please reorganize this information in a way that is suitable for offline, and vice versa. So going back and forth and helping these two situations to be connected to each other, avoiding simple repetition or, simple paste and copy. Also, connecting the formal context of education with the, let's say, informal, other context. So is your object, for example, intended for the community around the school, for example, for families, or for example, another school, or the society at large? So try to find a way that this community is also represented into the classroom. And there is exchange of communication. Nowadays, with the technology that we have, it's not that difficult. It's still really possible. So what kind of activity we have? I define two different types of activity. One is content activity, how you structure the content, and also and this is the concept of the module that I was telling you about. And also we have transversal activity. Let's first look at the content activity. So this is the ideal sequence. It's not strictly like, a recipe, but it's more, let's say, possibly a good way to go on. So the first step is the teacher giving a lecture. So the monological situation, I'm giving you relevant information, and this information, what is different here, that this information are useful to build the object that you have in mind. So then the teacher assigns the material, and then students can brainstorming about the question, the research question that I was telling you before. So then you organize expert group and jigsaw group, and ask the student to give a name to the group. This is a social strategy that helps the group to be more cohesive and to be, more, even if they're sitting in the same classroom for years. I tell you, because of my experience, based on my experience, it doesn't mean that they really know each other. And sometimes, it's a sort of discovery. It's really surprising them. I didn't know that, that my classmate that were sitting in the corner there had this, type of, for example, hobbies or this type of inclination or interest. So it can be really interesting, amazing process. Then the teacher can comment what the groups are doing, and those comments can be socially discussed, can be shared and discussed. For example, and this is the best way to do it is face-to-face, because, teacher assessment or comments are sensitive. And then finalizing the collaborative product, this can be done online, depending on the object, and face-to-face, the draft presentation and the feedbacks to the object. What are the transversal activities? Informal communication, so all kinds of information about, you already started to have the idea that it can be very messy. You have groups, expert groups, you have rules, you have some people outside the school that are coming in. Yes, it can be a little bit confusing. So that's why there is a need of informal communication transversally, where you give you kind of, tell the teacher, the student, it's okay that, to ensure them, to make them, not to be too much worry. Because, for example, one of the main worries that the students have when you introduce this type of model, how are you going to assess me? And this is, very, very interesting question, that it tells us that the main preoccupation that students have in classroom is, how I'm going to be assessed. And, how can I do exactly that thing that made the teacher thinking that I deserve the best grade. And it's something that is not really what we want, because what we want is students to be, in love with what they're doing, to be interested in what they're doing, and not just for the sake of an evaluation or an assessment. So to change a little bit, to move a little bit around this mindset, it needs a lot of, informal communication about the organization, about, for example, reflection of what has been done, about the sense of community. So, when the students come up with the name, it might be interesting to understand why they selected this kind of name. Another way to do transversal activity is, for example, using e-portfolios. This gives the portfolio or e-portfolios, depending how much you want to use technology in your context. And this gives the possibility to the student to show who they are, and to also update their portfolio along the way. I will tell you more in a minute. And also role-taking, which is, giving students specific responsibility. I already told you about the note-taker, but there can be much more rules, and I'll show you in a minute. So, about the portfolio, the structure, there is a lot of literature about the portfolios, and there are lots of models. What I found, it is essential, the minimum, it's, anything personal you like to share. So your hobbies, your things about your family, or about your pets, or your trips, your vacation, whatever you like to, other people to know. Your expectation about the course, about this teaching, about what is going on in the classroom at the moment, and then a section about reflection. And I use the concept of zone of proximal development and zone of actual development, which is, Vygotsky memory, and just, to honor Vygotsky. And I don't. You might don't use these labels because they are not being going to be clear to the students. It's just between us because I guess we share knowledge about Vygotsky. But the zone of actual development is what you learn, what you know, you are aware that you know. And the zone of proximal development is what you would like to know. And this is a way also to sustain students to fix their own objective, their own aims, their own goals, and then to find also a way themselves to get to that objective. So you give, the idea is that you give a set of information common to all the students, and then working into the groups and reflecting on their own portfolio, they might find their own direction within this large scenario that you're setting for them. Role taking, so they are individually taken, but they are for the group. You take a role, even if you do it yourself, personally, in first person, but it's clear, it's obvious that it's to support the group work. They can be a sort of simulation of real profession, or, for example, to sustain the cross-communication between groups, or the communication between online and offline, as the example that I gave you before. Again, here there's a lot of literature about role-taking and also there's a lot of literature that tells us that it's much easier to do it online than face-to-face, because online, you have the screen that is protecting you, and it's, especially for students that are maybe not used to be, to be exposed or, to talk in front of other people. And also, if the role is assigned by the teacher, this is also a way to ensure some kind of legacy. It's the teacher that told me to act in this specific way. So you are setting for them a pattern of behavior, of, activities, and they can explore, a position, a way of being that they didn't think before of that. So it's, a new identity experience. So here there's a list of possible roles, but you can the only limit here is your fantasy, your creativity. So those are some of the rules that I've been experimenting. There are, some of them are very known in the literature. For example, the moderator, the leader, the tutor. You can find them with different names. The note taker already talked about, the researcher. So look for more information. According to your own inclination, look for more information. According to the group interest, try to look for more information. So you make them active. You give them the essential information, not too much. This is also something, at least in my country, I don't know if it's a common problem also in other, like in Italy, that, students and parents complain that there is too much homework. So this is a way to solve the problem. Don't do too much homework. Don't give them too much material to study. Just give them the basic notion and then let them choose what they want to know more. In this way, they take also responsibility on the direction that the knowledge is going to take. The observer. So if you have, for example, a student that is too active, that never stops talking, that is always, in the first row, then you give them the role, for example, of the observer. So he learns to be, step a little bit outside, to look at the things from a different perspective. And the other way around can be with the moderator, leader, tutor. So the student, they are too shy, that never expose themselves. You give them such a rule, so they have to, practice in a different way. The skeptical is a rule really appreciated in the literature, is the student that doesn't believe it, that wants to know more, that wants to have more explanation, and usually helps a lot in developing the communication. And the last one is a rule that you can imagine how much I like, you can understand now how much I like Vygotsky. It's the friend of zone of proximal development. So it's a rule that we experimented already since few years already. So the idea is to ask the student to choose a special friend, to choose these friends that will help you in progressing, in doing better. So this can be called, again, if you call it the friend of zone of proximal development, it's going to be confusing for the student, unless you don't explain what Vygotsky meant and who Vygotsky was, but maybe it's not part of your content, of your curricula. So you can call it like simply a friend, or you can call it special friend or critical friend. I tried also with critical friend, but it was not too successful. If you do it, let me know how it works. And this is based on the portfolio. So look at portfolio of the student and see if there is a student that maybe is similar to you or exactly the opposite, complementary, that you can trust, that you see features in that person that can help you on improving. And once you've been chosen as friend of proximal development, what you do, you follow the activities, a sort of shadowing of the activities of that person that has chosen you, and you try to give feedbacks. So this is a way also to make dialogues, to make interaction between two specific students, and also to support responsibility, because I'll be also chosen if I choose a friend, but I also be chosen. What I usually do, I prepare very easy. I prepare a list like this, so I have a column student choosing and student chosen. So they know how to organize the couple. The only recommendation that I give is not to avoid reciprocation. So I choose you and you choose me. So it's going to be too close couple. So if you organize in a way that, if I choose you, you cannot choose me, then it's much easier, much functional also. So just to give you the overall organization of the structure, so you have groups, and you ask the student to give a name. You can do it this in parallel. And then you start with a lesson, question. Sorry, this is an Italian, domanda di ricerca. I'm sorry, it's research question. It should be RQ. And the learning material. Then you have discussion within the expert group, teacher comment, GISO discussion. I can use this one. I forgot about it. Let's see, where is it? Okay, here. So you have first step, you have lessons and research question, and then you provide the learning material. Then you have discussion within the expert group, teacher comments, GISO discussion, and finally you have the product. In parallel, transversal, you have role taking, leader, tutor, how you want to call it, responsible. For example, one rule can be someone that is overlooking and monitoring the production of the object. And then you have, again, parallel, friend of zone of proximal development, e-portfolio, and all the way through organizational and informal communication. So if you want to know more about how we used, for example, WhatsApp in this type of model, there is one publication that we had a couple of years ago. If you want to know more about the friend of proximal development, here there was another publication about how we worked and what it changed when we introduced this rule. So in summary, you have different type of variety of activity. For example, you have solo activity, individual study, reflection about the rule that has been assigned, or about the group activity, e-portfolio. You have also dias when you organize the combination with the partner with the zone, the friend of proximal development. You have group activities, at least two, but I recommend you have at least two models, two pieces when you can replace, read that. But you can try with one at the beginning, and then if you feel comfortable, you can use it. You can repeat this structure that I showed you before. I'm sorry. And then you have collective activities, for example, discussion on the teacher comment, object presentation, both the draft and the final product, peer feedback on the draft. And they are different in nature. They can be transformative, for example, from educational material to individual and collective product. It can be reflective, for example, about the role taking and the product. It can be informal, for example, what's happening with the portfolio, the organizational communication that I was telling you, to keep it open all the way along. And for example, activities like name the group. Okay, so I'll give you some example. This was like the first attempt to apply this model. It has been done in Netherlands, in Finland. Okay, my geography at the moment. Okay, it was a lower secondary school. It's Finland, I swear. And this was, they have a desk. In this classroom, specific classroom, they have this desk. If you open it, it's like an empty space. So they started to reflect that, it's not convenient to have this empty space. You need an organizer to put into the desk. So they started to understand, to reflect upon. Oops, I'm good. They started to reflect upon, the size of the object that they're using. Of course, there was the math teacher behind this project, and they developed this organizer, and they actually did it with a, famous company that, they're selling furniture that you have to organize yourself. Okay, well. This is the second example. I did, this was in Italy, back in Italy. This was very challenging, actually, because we worked with a professional school that were meant for their cook. And as you know, in Italy, this is a big deal. And we worked with 2 classrooms, and they were very special classrooms, both of them. This classroom in particular, see, the students are up there in this picture. See if this work. Here, this way. You see the students? They're old. It's like a night school, evening school. So those are, grown-up people. They already work in restaurants, and they just want to have, a piece of paper that shows that are cooked. And, it was not that easy for the teacher to handle. The teacher is back here. This guy here is the teacher. So younger than the student, let's say, more or less. So we introduced the concept of the menu. So they had to develop a menu. And to do that, based on local products, they had to talk and discuss with the local producer and the restaurants. And at the same time, the teacher asked them to combine different type of, cooking style, to look at the protein, and, it has to be balanced. I don't want to go in detail on that. And then finally, they made up the menu, and we tasted, and it was really good. So see, this is me, this is the principal. Okay, so the same classroom, the same school, different classroom. Here is the physics teacher, and he had a different type of problem. How do you convince kids that wants to be a cook that physics is important for them? Very hard to do it. So why should I learn physics? Who do I care about it? So starting from this reflection, at some point through different brainstorming, we come up at some point we faced the problem of a special oven. I don't know the words in English, I'm sorry. Yeah, convection steam oven. I found that word, yeah. I forgot that I found it. A convection steam oven. Do you know that? Any of you? Oh yeah, good. Do you work in a professional school? No. So what I learned, I had no idea. What I learned is it's an oven that allows different type of cooking style. It's like you can boil in oven at the same time. And it was very hard for them to understand how it works. So there was the point. You need physics to understand that. So why this oven is not clear? Because there was not good instructions. Okay, build instruction. You do the instruction for that. So so they contacted the company producing the oven, they contacted the restaurants, other students using that oven, so they found out that actually there was a gap there. Though this oven was used in different places, and it was difficult for many people. So at the beginning they did this. Where is the laser? I can't find the laser. Sorry. Oh, here it is. So this was the first draft, let's say. It's a panel, a plastic panel. They put in next to the oven, and then students the year after. So this was this version of the product was produced by students that were at the last year. So they finished school. So they gave, I'd say, the inheritance to the students coming next year, the following year, to develop, to continue developing this product, and they come up with the video presentation. How to use this oven. And this is our kind of, few pictures taken in school during the classroom, during the activities. Okay, let me give you another example. This is a very interesting example because it's not only, in the previous example, I show you how, one classroom passed on the classroom the year after. Here is an example of the same thing. So different cohort of students, moving on the same product, but also a network of schools. So the idea, again, through brainstorming, we detected that students were not so happy to cross a square. This is in Rome, to cross a square next to their school, which is this one here, the laser. Here, it is here. This is the square. And they were not happy to pass by, to cross the square, because it was, not well kept. It was full of garbage and, wild nature. And also, there were like other stuff that, you can imagine. So, okay, let's do a project to renew and to requalify the square. And so they worked together. It was two different schools that were, facing the same square. So they started to study, first of all, to study what the square is, in terms of, for example, history. So they went back to the concept of agora. And in terms of geography, so, the squares in different cities in the world, how different they are. And what is the function of the square? So they started to interview all the people that were using the square, like babysitters, all people sitting on the bench, the shopper, the people, the selling, the business around the square. There was a metro, so they started they interviewed also the people taking the metro. There is also a church. Of course, in Italy, there is a church everywhere, especially in Rome. Here, there is a church, so they visit the church to try to understand the relationship between the church and the square, that specific square. So they propose a change. Actually, the turning point in this project was that they noticed that one of the wall, for example, here, see one of this wall here, was at some point the writers, the writers, they paint the walls. So they found that there were, at some point there was some design, some painting. And then a few days later, it was everything green. It was covered, everything was covered. And they were very puzzled. What does it mean? Is that an art and people don't appreciate it? Or is something outrageous that society don't want to see? So it was right that somebody covers this. So we started a big discussion about, contemporary art, and then they decided they interviewed also one of this writer that was, willing to enter the school. So this is something interesting, I have to tell you, how interested people are to come into the classroom. I mean, I found, these people are working, they're maybe they are making exhibition, or, they have their own business. But nevertheless, with no money, for free, they were very happy to get into the classroom to explain to the student what they're doing, what is their aim. And not only, I'm not just talking about those writers or, artists in general, but in general, any expert that I contacted to walk into the classroom and to give, their testimony, their, expert witness, they were always very happy to do it. And this is, a relief. And I would be interested to know how it works also in your country, because it means that, in general, people recognize the value of, the formal instruction, the formal context, and it's important for them to have a connection. Okay, other example, this is from my own course, as it was mentioned before, I teach e-learning, so products that are attuned to the e-learning. So, for example, a MOOC course on critical thinking for teachers, so devoted to teachers. Other example, an app for job placement to be used by the student themselves at the University of Bari. Serious game called Who Wants to Be the President? So to know better the Constitution. Another serious game for young diabetic people. This was developed together with the Institute of the hospital, the institute, the medical researcher. A MOOC course for manager on leadership. Try to train sellers of a new product of a famous brand, Italian famous brand. A video to explain what artificial intelligence is. And the one that you see with the, I didn't. No, I'm sorry, I thought I put the asterisks. But some of this product has been included in the catalog and has been sold by the companies, and the companies recognize the royalties, the copyrights also to the students. Conclusions, almost done. I don't know how, I didn't check the time, but I guess. Okay, so some conclusions. At the end, my feeling is that applying this complex model, I agree, but it means also that you are not only training knowledge and technical skills, but also social skills, how to work in group, for example, how to work in peers, for example, professional skills, because you have to, transfer your knowledge into a product, which is, what professional do. Soft skill, for example, self-assessment, creativity, innovation, problem solving, critical thinking, organizational skills, time management. Digital competencies, how to use technology for certain type of aims. Communication skills, for example, how do you communicate also with people that are very different than yourself. Has an impact on identity development, agency development, knowledge development, creativity, and entrepreneurial. I never know how to pronounce this word. Entrepreneurial spirits. Okay, you got it. Sorry, forgive my English. Social and emotional skills, and you have also the indication of the papers that is documenting all this aspect. It is hard. Yes, it is. It's very hard. And, recently had a focus group with teacher and principal, and it's hard because you have to involve external agents from outside the school, and it might take some time and, some difficulties. It's difficult because it's not easy to recognize the authorship. To whom belongs that object? Who is the one that invented that object? Who is, the main responsible? It might be a question to be addressed. Management of time. Manage time can be difficult because, there are many, activities to organize. Also, it's difficult because everyone has to go to the same direction. This is the principal words, so like your teacher, family, students, everyone has to have, the same objective. It's difficult to overcome the techno stress because sometimes, you have to use different type of technology at the same time. You store, document, and drive, and then you chat with the other student on WhatsApp, and then you use a specific software to develop, for example, a map or something else. It's difficult because it's difficult to have the recognition from the society that school can actually contribute to the development of that society. I mean, school is not seen in this way, doesn't have this role in the society. It's something that I became aware of this, by doing these projects. It's difficult because you have to keep also family involved and have to keep them informed and motivated. Because it's hard to understand the value of transversal skills, that sometimes they feel like they are competing with the hard skill that, are more related to the content of what we're teaching. It is very difficult, but we have to do it. We have to do it because in the students' world, there's a note that a group of students left about, one of this project. We felt involved and protagonist of an activity. We were able to transform ideas that were initially often vague and confused into a concrete and functional product. This object is the result of a collaborative work of all of us. We have learned to use different types of technology to do something useful and interesting. We shared information, experience, skills. We felt unsure and frustrated, but also we had a lot of fun. With this project, we have learned to look beyond. During the activities, teachers and tutors were next to us and with us. We have shown that we can fly high and we don't fear learning. Those are the reasons that made us very proud with what we have done. And so I leave you with the student word. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ligorio, for the very insightful presentation. Interesting the way its tentacles go out into so many areas.
It does.
Yeah,
I
know. We have time for just one or two questions if there is anybody who would like to raise something. Or is it all a bit too much? I think Professor Ligorio will be with us all day today.
Sure, of course, and tonight.
And this evening as well for the dinner. So if there are no questions right now, then I would invite you to catch up with her during the coffee break, during lunch, during dinner, and in and out of the sessions. Well, yes, we do have one question. Tom?
I'm sorry, apparently everybody wants coffee, but I also would like to emphasize...
You prefer coffee over me? Okay. Okay.
Indeed, no, I would like to emphasize the fact that it was really a very good presentation. One of the questions that I have is one of the success factors must be that the students must be locked in to do all these roles and all these group assignments if they are persuaded in advance what the end product will be. Isn't that the case? Because I think otherwise students can also become confused because of the complexity. We have to do these roles, this kind of group work, and if they don't always see the end,
that's right.
Is that
it could be? Yeah, I mean, it could be, but if you start with the defining of the object, starting from the students, so you start from defining what is going to be built, what is going to be our end product of this, let's say the classroom becomes a community, so you have this tremendous opportunities that you have 20, 30, 10 people, I don't know how big are your classroom, that can work 1 year long, 1 academic year long to develop a common project. And so let's find something that is interesting for all of us. So if you started with brainstorming, of course, guided brainstorming by the teacher, then the object is something that they want to do it. Becomes, something that is part of their aims. And so everything else is, related to that. Yeah. How do we achieve that object? Then you have to trust the teacher, because I am the expert, but I'm going to guide you on building and developing this object. Maybe not this year, maybe you have a very, but the square that I showed you, I was really skeptical. I mean, is it really possible that student can change, can impact a city like Rome, giving instruction or direction how to rebuild a square? So I was the one very skeptical, but the principal and the students, they were, no, we have to do it. And they passed on in different generation, let's say, and finally they made it. They've been interviewed by Rai 3, the third channel, Italian channel. They've been interviewed because they had, developed a project, how the square should have been. They showed the project to the city hall, to the municipalities, and they got funding to do it. So, can you imagine how interesting and exciting is for the teacher? As I show you the final word. We started with vague idea that, slowly become very, more defined, and finally we made it. So having the product there and being able to look at the product is a long process. And, everything else is in function of that results. And rules are temporary. I mean, if you assign a rule to a student, it doesn't have to be usually, I would not recommend to have it, all year long, the same rule. It's interesting to turn the rules and also to share the reflection upon the rules, who were my main challenging uncovering the rule, and I pass on to the other student. It's also a way to socialize, soft skill, for example. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Coffee.
Coffee is now in the atrium.
Thank you.
I remind you that there are several coffee stations, so please go all the way to the end. The lines tend to be shorter. The conference dinner is at 7 o'clock this evening in this area. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the day and later as well.